Well, I woke up about, I don't know, probably about 4:30 something in the morning this morning, and I looked at my phone, and in my text messages was a message from my father, and it said your Uncle Kenneth passed today about 10:03, and I went back to sleep, and I woke up and I texted him something like, texted my dad something like, thank you for telling me, I love you, Dad. And then so if you know the history between me and my father, we hadn't always seen eye to eye, hadn't always gotten along. I've always loved him. Don't get that twisted. I've always loved my father, but as a teenager, you bump heads and you rebel. It happens. I never stopped loving my father. Here recently, I say within the last couple years, we've had better communication and a better relationship, to the point where every time I speak to him on the phone, before I get off the phone, I tell him I love him, because I do love my father. He's getting up there in age. He's in his 70s, and I just want to enjoy the time that I have left with him. Even though we're kind of far away, we do have telephone communication, and I just want to enjoy that time with my father. Uh, and I myself have noticed my relationships with my sons starting to get better. So it's kind of a cycle that I'm trying to rebuild. You know, do right by my father, and my children, my sons, will do right by me, in that type of sense. As far as having a meaningful relationship, I'm not ashamed to admit that I was out of my son's life, both my son's life, for a long time. And, those are years you don't get back. So you make the best of them. But that's not what this was about. So I read the text message and I went back to sleep as best I could. And I woke up about my regular time, responded to his message. And then a little bit later on this morning, I called him. Now, mind you, every time before I get off the phone, I always tell my dad that I love him. But this particular time, I said, all right, man, I love you, man. Oh, no, I love you, Dad, before we got off the phone. And he'll probably get mad at me for telling this, but it's my channel, whatever. He said, I get strength from hearing you say that. And I really didn't know what to say to that. It just kind of caught me off guard. Because I tell him I love him all the time, but hearing him say that, I heard something different in his voice. And I'm not trying to make this a morbid post or anything. This is kind of therapy for me. You guys know that. I've never heard that like that from him. I've heard him say, I love you, and it makes me feel good to hear you say that. But that was the first time I believe he said, I get strength from hearing you say that. And for the first time, I realized that my father is on the downside of his life. Not down meaning anything negative, but his best years are behind him now. There's still some great years left in him, but his best years are behind him now. And I'm kind of having a hard time coming to grips with that, because I've wasted so much time not maximizing that time that I have with him. And I guess that's why I try to compensate for it now with the phone conversations and whatnot, and letting him really know that I do love him. And that just kind of struck me as it hit me different. This particular time, what he said hit me different, in the fact that I've never heard him say that before. And so to that, I said, well, I love you, dude. You're my father. I love you, dude. I'm gonna talk to you later. Yeah, I'm gonna talk with you later. And that's how we hang up the phone. Our conversations. I think the longest conversation we had recently uh, was maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes. Our conversations aren't that long, but they're meaningful. I think the longest conversation I've ever had with my dad was probably when I was getting in trouble in high school or whatever. But I don't know if he'll see this or not. But Dad, I'm gonna let you know, and I'm gonna let the world know, dude. I love you. I love my father, and as a father to teenage boys, I do understand now what I put my father through. Not so much in a negative sense, but being a rebellious teenage boy. And not that my sons are rebellious. I have great sons. My sons are awesome. Um, Now that I've reconnected with them in their older years, my sons are awesome. I don't, you say awful, but awesome. My sons are just awesome individuals. Very handsome, strapping young men. They take after their father. Um, their father takes after their grandfather. Uh, but I'm starting to notice how the relationships are changing now. Whereas before I was always bitter with my father, and then my sons I felt like were bitter with me. Me and my oldest boy had a kind of a coming to Jesus conversation maybe 3 months ago, 4 months ago, but I really appreciate him saying what he said to me because it put me in check. And I thought about the times I spoke to my father that way. And so it's come full circle. And then even then, I'm looking forward to meeting my grandsons. Not anytime soon, boys. Well, at least wait till I'm 50. So you got about 6 more years. At least wait till I'm 50. But I'm looking forward to seeing my own grandsons, and fostering that relationship. Uh, I really didn't mean to go this way with this post, but I just had to get some things off of my chest. And just hearing, going back to that, what my father said, just hearing him say that made me really realize that he's on the downside. And I guess if I was to motivate or bring something inspirational behind that, it would be to go to your family members, especially ones that you've been bitter toward for a while. Go to that family member and squash all of that, especially if they're older. Especially if they're older. 30-year-old Rory would have been like, nah, screw that. 25-year-old Rory was just a knucklehead anyway. But 44-year-old Rory realizes too, I'm coming up on the cusp of middle age, and I'm looking 50 in the mouth, and realizing that, yeah, the best years of my life are behind me. Not to say that I can't make any more memories, but the best years of my life are pretty much behind me. I'm at the middle of the race here now, and I've enjoyed every step. I want my father to know that I love him. I want my sons to know that I love you, and I guess I love my daughter too. I'll have to make her own separate post, but especially for us men, there's no harm in telling your father you love him. If you've had a falling out with your father, there's nothing wrong with telling your father you love him. Make the best of the time you have left with your father. I look at my uncles that have passed. 3 uncles have passed in like a span of a year and a half, and I can feel the hurt of my father. It's not a good feeling. So if he gets strength from hearing me tell him I love you, Dad, I love you a million times over, man. I love you to infinity and beyond, man. Maybe I should keep this one personal, but I'm going to share it anyway. Maybe it'll inspire someone to pick up a phone and tell their people that they love them. Maybe it won't. You guys have a great day.